I'm Mark.
I'm Josh.
And welcome to this special edition of Alter Ego Comics TV, the Essential Marvel Graphic Novels to Read, Part 2. We did Part 1 a while ago. I don't remember when. It wasn't last year, was it? It might have been last year. It might have been last year. But as a recap, or you can go look at our videos on YouTube and find the first part of that list, but I'm going to give them to you here in no particular order. Let me go back a step. This was in response to DC Comics putting together a freebie called the Essential DC Reading List or something like that. And Josh and I pointed out that much of what was in there was New 52 stuff, which didn't make a lot of sense to us. We felt it was just kind of a way to get people to pick up New 52 stuff, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But DC Comics has been around for a long, long time, and there are definitely some stories that didn't make the cut on their essential list, so we decided to put together our list of essential Marvel stories. So, to recap, the last list, the first 10 were Marvels, House of M, Civil War, Planet Hulk, Old Man Logan, Iron Man, World's Most Wanted, the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale Color series, which includes Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Gray, and Spider-Man Blue, X-Men Messiah Complex, Guardians of the Galaxy by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, and Runaways. So those were the first 10, and we're going to do 10 more. First one up is Wolverine by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. This was kind of the inspiration for the Wolverine movie that came out a couple years ago, the most recent Wolverine movie.
But you should still read it.
Yeah, I say kind of because they borrowed some elements, but then they also went off and did some stupid stuff in the movie. But this is the core of who Wolverine was for a long time. We didn't know a lot about the character. Wolverine had always been part of the X-Men, and we never really had a chance to explore not his origins, but what made him who he was. And this is the story that does that. So it takes place in Japan. It introduces Mariko and Yukio. Mariko might have been introduced in X-Men, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Lots of stuff that kind of stuck with Wolverine for many, many years. And, of course, written by Chris Claremont, who at the time was writing X-Men and continued to write X-Men for many years afterwards. Artwork by Frank Miller, when he could still draw, and no response. So if you're looking for a great entry point for Wolverine, we mentioned Old Man Logan in the first part. I would probably go with this story before you go with Old Man Logan, but it really doesn't matter. Wolverine by Claremont and Miller definitely makes the list.
All right, up for me, we've got Young Avengers, written by Alan Heinberg, art by
Jim Chung.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So this is a series. This is one of those Marvel series that took a while to come out. But essentially, after Avengers Disassembled, there were no real Avengers in the Marvel Universe for a while. And during that period, a group of people with, let's say, tangential connections to various Avengers sort of formed their own superhero team to try and step up and take care of things, calling themselves the Young Avengers. And it was just really, really good. It's great characterizations of young people. In the same way last time we talked about Runaways, this is also similarly good in that vein because pretty much all of these characters are new characters. You don't have to know a lot of backstory. If you can identify all of the Avengers in the Avengers movie, you probably know enough to read Young Avengers and really enjoy it. Yeah, I don't know how much to give away here, but it's a great story about them stepping up to the legacy. We see some of the reaction from the actual Avengers. And the first arc, it was a 12-issue arc that is really exceptionally good. There's also a follow-up called Avengers Children's Crusade, which I would absolutely read in concert. Same creative team, and it really sort of wraps up the story as a whole. But this really changed some aspects of the Marvel Universe. Matt Fraction's Hawkeye would not exist without Kate Bishop, or it wouldn't be the same without Kate Bishop, who first appears in Young Avengers. We get a lot of legacy heroes that are really interesting and more keyed into kind of a modern Marvel Universe. We get the grandson of the Isaiah Bradley, the Captain America from Truth, the black original Captain America who was like a test subject. And we get, and the incarnation, I think this is my favorite, is Iron Lad, which is an Iron Man from the future who's come back in time, and is just incredibly cool. And it's just great. It's incredibly good, well characterized, and has excellent it doesn't really, it does impact the Marvel Universe, but it's sort of woven intimately into the Marvel Universe that makes it feel very organic, even though they're all new characters.
Well, I think the best comparison, and it's something I hadn't thought of until you said it, was Runaways.
Yeah.
That if you have enjoyed Runaways, if you're a fan of Runaways, you should definitely check out Young Avengers. And for some reason, it didn't catch on the way that Runaways did. At least I don't think it has. And it didn't stick the way some of these new characters like Miles Morales and Kamala Khan and Thor, Goddess of Thunder, those have really caught on because there's a lot of media coverage, I think, and it's more well known. Young Avengers came out at a time when Marvel didn't necessarily have a spotlight on it. It was kind of at the beginning and just before the Marvel movies started to come out. Mm-hmm. So it's a great book to pick up, really for readers of all ages. Well, unless you're a little kid, but I'd say probably 12 or 13 and up.
Yeah.
And it's definitely on par with Runaways.
Oh, and if you liked the Ant-Man movie this summer, Cassie Lang is a central character in the story.
Ant-Man's daughter.
Ant-Man's daughter. Sorry.
Yes. All right, next up for me is X-Men, the Dark Phoenix Saga. It's just a must-read for X-Men fans. Probably in the top 3, if not the top 1. It gives all of the team members a chance to shine. It introduced a lot of new characters. It introduced the Hellfire Club. It introduced Dazzler. And culminates with the death of Jean Grey. And that had ramifications for many, many years within the X-Men books and still does. It's just a really important book within the Marvel Universe that, again, I think the heat has kind of died off of a little bit. At the time it came out, it was controversial. It was selling gangbusters. And, now there's so much other stuff, I think, competing for people's attention that sometimes it gets overlooked. So Dark Phoenix Saga is definitely a must-read if you're a Marvel Comics fan, especially if you're an X-Men fan.
Yeah, and I would almost compare the Dark Phoenix Saga in some ways to like the coming of Galactus. The Fantastic Four make their bones on being able to defeat or outsmart anything, and Galactus was something that we didn't think they could defeat. And the Phoenix Force is, to this day, something that no one can really fight against. The best you can do is make do and compromise, and that's why it's lasted so long and recurs as a character, and a character strong, but as a force in the X-Men comics. Next up for me, 1602, written by, or is it officially titled Marvel 1602?
I think so.
Yeah. Marvel 1602, written by Neil Gaiman with art by Adam Kubert, Andy Kubert,
one of
them Kubert boys.
Yeah.
There's probably a copy right here behind us somewhere.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's right there. Which one is it?
Andy.
Andy Kubert. Andy Kubert, son of Joe Kubert, comic books legend. And this is one of my very favorite Marvel stories because it's sort of its own Elseworlds. It's relatively self-contained. You don't really need to know anything else. If you've seen the Marvel movies, you know everything you need to know to read 1602. Basically, the Marvel Universe in all of its form and splendor begins to appear in 1602. So you've got, and the Fantastic Four are not space explorers. They're, actual explorers, charting the edges of water, going out and having weird things happen to them. And we're still talking about a time when people thought, you might fall off the edge of the world, where there's here be dragons. The world was a lot scarier place. You've got the X-Men, you've got mutants being led by Charles Xavier, being hunted down by the church because they're witch breed and they're outside the laws of God. And of course, the people leading the Inquisition against them is Magneto, which is just super awesome. You've got Nick Fury and Stephen Strange acting as advisors to Queen Elizabeth. You've got colonies in the New World. I don't even know how to describe the story. It's amazing. It's everything you love in the Marvel Universe transposed into the 1600s, and it's done incredibly well. None of the transpositions are awesome. There's Daredevil is a traveling bard who's blind. I mean, obviously still blind because Daredevil. And it's just a great self-contained story that I can't explain to you at all because anything I say will spoil the plot. But if you love the Marvel characters and you want to see them just tilted a few angles to the left, a few degrees to the left, this is an amazing story. Incredibly well written by Gaiman. And yeah.
Great artwork by Kubert as well.
Very pretty.
Yeah, if there wasn't a good artist on the series, it wouldn't hold up as well to go with Gaiman's art or Gaiman's writing. Next on the list is Daredevil Born Again by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. This, to me, is the ultimate Daredevil story. It shows Matt Murdock at his weakest as well as Matt Murdock at his strongest. It really takes the Kingpin Murdock relationship to an amazing level that we haven't really seen in lots of other comics. And to me, it sets up, maybe I'm just making this up in my head, but I talk about it all the time. There's the Karen Page trilogy, and this is part one of the Karen Page trilogy, followed by Kevin Smith's Guardian Devil, and finally Daredevil Yellow. But I can't tell you too much about it without ruining the plot, but this is a great place to kind of start for Daredevil, especially if you've seen the show. You'll be familiar with lots of the characters in here. And I would expect at some point to see some of Born Again in the Netflix series if it continues.
I would, yeah.
Because it's the next logical place to go. So, Daredevil Born Again, the ultimate Daredevil story. That sounds like a Hallmark movie.
No, that's absolutely accurate, though. Yes. All other Daredevil stories since are in some way built on what happened in Born Again. Next up, we've got Astonishing X-Men. This was written by Joss Whedon with art by John Cassaday. And the X-Men were for a long time, from the late 80s up into, well, even now to a certain extent, the Marvel's flagship title. I mean, the Avengers were the main heroes, Fantastic Four is the first family, Spider-Man's a big deal, but for a long time the X-Men were a sales juggernaut, and that's why there was a bajillion X-Men titles and one Fantastic Four title. But they have gone through kind of waves and troughs, and after Grant Morrison's New X-Men, which was an acclaimed run and a highly controversial run.
Weird as hell.
But there's still elements of it I liked. But going out of that, they needed somebody to do a new flagship X-Men book. And Quesada ran into Joss Whedon at Comic-Con. They talked it up, hit it off, and Joss Whedon, creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly, and director of the first two Avengers movies, now, not then, obviously, took it over and did his version of the X-Men. And what I like most about Whedon's X-Men is it's the iconic X-Men. One of the problems with being an X-Man is you die a lot, so the cast is constantly changing. They're bringing people in and out, and Whedon went back to kind of the core X-Men, Cyclops, Wolverine, Beast, Kitty Pryde. Sorry, I was just running through spoilers in my head. That's it for the core cast. Emma Frost is there. And his stories had a freshness to them. Bringing Kitty Pryde back, who had been kind of off the team, she was off with Excalibur and doing other things for quite a while before that, really was a hallmark. Whedon has said on multiple occasions that in some way Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Buffy Summers, was inspired by his love of Kitty Pryde, a strong female figure in a world that she could not deal with that was bigger than her. And bringing it back, bringing her a point of view character, bringing Kitty back as an instructor at the Xavier School was incredibly compelling. And Whedon did a great job of hitting all the hallmarks of things we love about the X-Men, the sacrifice, the triumph, the romance, and making it all feel new and fresh. So Astonishing X-Men is a great story.
And this is a comic to give to your non-comic reading friends. Yeah. If they like the X-Men movies or the Marvel movies that are being made, but they don't read comics, Astonishing X-Men is a good gateway drug. It's a good entrance into the world of comics. Next up for me is Captain America Winter Soldier by Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting. One of those guys. I think it's Steve Epting.
Yes.
It's not up there. We can't just turn around and not every book is right
Not every
behind
book
us.
is on the wall.
So this was the beginning of Ed Brubaker's run on Captain America, which did the unthinkable and brought Bucky Barnes back from the dead as the Winter Soldier. And everybody that heard about it ahead of time felt the same way. They thought, dear Lord, why is this happening? Three people will always remain dead in the Marvel Universe: Gwen Stacy, Uncle Ben, and Bucky. And Brubaker did it. He managed to bring Bucky back in a way that made sense, in an entertaining, action-packed way. And this is that story. This is the story that inspired the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and which is arguably the best Marvel movie. And again, the most accessible, I think, to the general public because it's a great spy flick. The artwork is great, the writing is great, the anguish that you see on Steve Rogers' face and the pain that he feels at seeing his former sidekick back as a killing machine that's been brainwashed is just, man, it's great stuff. And it introduces, the characters, again, that we see in the movie, but also there's some stuff that doesn't show up in the movie that continues to play a part in the Captain America comics. So this one is perfect for new readers, existing readers. If you're a current comic reader and you're a current Marvel reader, this is something you have to read to understand what makes Captain America and why the Winter Soldier exists. So I'm really interested to see, at least on the big screen, what happens with the Winter Soldier when we get to Captain America 3.
Right.
But this is what started it all.
Next up, we've got J. Michael Straczynski's Thor. Obviously written by J. Michael Straczynski with art by
Olivier
Coipel.
He's French.
So again, I guess all of these stories end up coming back to Avengers Disassembled. But around the time of Avengers Disassembled, Thor went through Thor Disassembled Ragnarok. And it was exactly what you expect Ragnarok to be. The Norse pantheon collapsed in on itself, everyone was dead and gone, and that was it. There was no Thor. That's why when you read Civil War, Thor is not a factor, because Thor is dead at that point. And Straczynski, who's best known for his work on Babylon 5, and of course as executive story editor on Murder, She Wrote, and did he win an Academy Award for the
for Changeling?
Angelina Jolie movie?
I don't think so.
I thought he was nominated. No, it doesn't matter. But he also has done some nice screenwriting work in the last couple of years. So this is the story of how Thor and the entire Norse pantheon is returned to the Marvel Comics, setting the stage for many of the things that go on in the current universe. And Straczynski did a great job. It's always tricky to bring someone back from the dead, like we were just talking about with Bucky. There's a lot of backlash against it. And Straczynski found a way to do it that made sense. And he didn't just bring one person back from the dead. He brought back, a whole cast of characters. Loki, the Warriors 3, anyone Asgardian comes back in this story, or as a consequence of this story. And it was very relatable, easy to pick up for anybody. You didn't need to know at that point, 50-plus years of Thor continuity. And it was just great. It gave us some really cool touchstones that are still relevant. It gave us Lady Loki. When the Asgardians are resurrected, they're being resurrected in human bodies. And so we had a female Loki running around. And Loki's a shapeshifter, but something about him maintaining that form throughout the whole book gave a different dynamic to the relationship and made him seem even more devious for some reason. I don't know what that says about me that I interpreted it that way. But that was great. The real touchstone in the Thor verse, the long-standing outcome of this is Broxton. I'm trying to think how. Essentially, as a consequence of the story, Asgard itself physically comes back. The gods recreate Asgard as a floating city over Broxton, Oklahoma, and the relationship between this small town out west and the Asgardians is a key touch point. It makes these godlike figures seem human. We're able to see them through human eyes and how they interact with normal people. But it's also a significant plot point in several Marvel series going after this for years, and I think it also heavily inspired the Thor movie.
Which Straczynski was a screenwriter on.
Straczynski was a screenwriter on and has a cameo in. He's the first guy that goes out and tries to pick up the hammer and the kind of Carhartts and stuff. So yeah, if you like Thor, if you're enjoying the Thor movies, this is an amazing place to start. There's 3 volumes, and they're all good.
My final addition to the list is Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Michael Bendis and Marc Bagley. This was part of the Ultimate launch. Actually, this launched the Ultimate Universe back in 2000, I think. Maybe 98, I don't know, around 2000. So it gave us a high school age Peter Parker again. It gave Bendis the opportunity, not me, I wasn't telling the story, Bendis the opportunity to retell the Spider-Man origin story set in present day. And they tried that a couple times before, and they didn't work for one reason or another. But Bendis really nails it. In fact, in the first 6 issues, I don't think Peter has a costume in the first 6 issues. It's a lot of talking and a lot of character development, which is great, and that's what Bendis is really well. That's what Bendis succeeds at. And the fact that Ultimate Spider-Man is still going on, and in this case, we've had a passing of the torch from Peter Parker to Miles Morales within the Ultimate Universe, and again, Miles Morales is a character that's not going anywhere. He's going to be part of the mainstream Marvel Universe by the end of Secret Wars. Bendis and Bagley were on this book together for over 100 issues, and they broke the record that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had for working together on Fantastic Four. It's so good. I cannot stress enough how entertaining Ultimate Spider-Man is, even if you're a fan of the core Marvel universe. Keep in mind this takes place in a different universe, so we're seeing different versions of characters that we're very familiar with. Some are very similar, some are very different, but it all comes down to Bendis on this. This is Bendis's baby, and he's been steering it, for 15 years. You got to admire that. There are very few licensed books, so either Marvel or DC or any other licensed property that has the same creator involved for that length of time, and they basically have a hands-off policy, do what you want. And he tells an amazing story that is available in about 24 different trade paperbacks.
It's more than that. It's like 20 volumes in softcover.
24. That's 24.
Okay. That's more.
2 bakers. No. Ultimate Spider-Man. A lot of people are jumping in with the Miles Morales Volume 1, but that's great. But if you want to check out the origins and the beginnings of the Ultimate Universe and Ultimate Spider-Man, go back and check out the original Volume 1.
Yeah. And last up on our list of top 20 Marvel stuff, Marvel stories, is New Avengers Breakout. After Avengers Disassembled, there were no Avengers books for a while. New Avengers is when Brian Michael Bendis took over, and do you remember who the artist is on this first arc?
David Finch.
David Finch? Really? Huh.
Mm-hmm.
This is when Bendis took over and kind of rebooted the Avengers universe, giving us the New Avengers. The big changes and changes that were controversial at the time, and even still to some people are, were the addition of Peter Parker and Wolverine to the team. And I think that the best testament to this is the start of a very long run, but this first volume itself is self-contained, relatively so, and great. And you see how this team assembles. And I think the real testament to it, when you're talking about licensed stuff like this, where it's part of a larger universe and several levels of different storytelling, is how much it gets reused. And the basic plot from Breakout is the Raft, the giant supervillain prison, has a breakout, and we've got to hunt down a crap ton of supervillains. And that version of the plot has been reused in several of the video games, in the animated series. That they keep going back to this because it's a great story. It's a great plot line. It's a great reason to bring these people together. And Bendis' characterization of the Avengers are amazing. Oh, he also added Luke Cage. I guess Luke Cage wasn't previously an Avenger regularly, but Bendis loves him, so he had to throw him in there. And Cage became kind of a driving force for the Avengers for several years, and he's still a significant factor. He's getting his own Netflix series, which I would argue probably wouldn't have happened without his appearances in here. And it's the great core Avenger story. House of M, Civil War, these are stories about things that happen to the Avengers. They're about events that are important. They're about emotional connections. But New Avengers Breakout is an Avengers story. It's just about what the Avengers are. And it's awesome.
It is. So there you have it. We've finished our list of the top 20 essential Marvel graphic novels, storylines. We're debating on what to call this thing. Josh will come up with something, I'm sure, before he uploads it to YouTube. And by no means is this the be-all, end-all list. So if you have any suggestions, any things you think we missed, please add them to the comments below. We also kind of struggled a little bit with some of the newer stuff that's out, because Marvel has been publishing some amazing new characters, and I think we're going to do another top 5, top 10 list sometime in the near future where we talk about those, because I think those are going to be the entry point for a lot of new readers as well. And just in case you're wondering, one of the ways we came up with this list was by looking at what we owned personally. So if we felt strongly enough to buy one of these, then we felt that it was probably one that should be on the list. Got a lot of reading ahead of you folks, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thanks again for watching. If you did like this episode, please give us a thumbs up, and we'll see you very soon.